These days, true muscle cars are in short supply. Dodge's Challenger is likely the only true muscle car left, and yet, journalists, including myself, use the term more as an adjective than a noun. So let's say you've wanted a muscle car, but you're a family man. What do you buy? Well, today we're going wheel to wheel with two very different muscle cars, the Lexus GSF and the Dodge Charger Scat Pack. We'll start with the brand synonymous with muscle, the Dodge. The Charger has many trims and iterations, but today we've got the naturally aspirated 6.4-liter Hemi V8 from SRT. Contrary to popular belief, this is not a Hellcat engine minus the supercharger. The Scat Pack is actually a bigger engine, the 6.4-liter here versus the 6.2 supercharged in the Hellcat. Here in the Scat Pack, the engine makes 485 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque. Power goes through an 8-speed automatic gearbox and burns the back rubber to shreds. Then we move on to the fancy boy muscle car here, the Lexus GSF. When an interior looks like this and the price tag looks like this, it's no longer a muscle car because, well, that wouldn't sell. No, it's more of a GT car. Traditionally, GT cars aren't sedans, but all the other stuff is present here. 5 liters of naturally aspirated V8 making 467 horsepower and 389 pound-feet of torque. Power also goes through an 8-speed gearbox to the back wheels. So despite lacking a little bit in the torque figure from the Lexus, the performance here should be fairly similar, right? Well, let's grab the keys and find out. All right, so here's the basic muscle car formula. You take pretty much anything, and you stuff a big V8 in it, and you send power to the back wheels. So why not do that with a massive sedan? This is kind of what Dodge does. I mean, their whole brand is built on just barbaric and raw power and sound and just the visceral experience that you get behind the wheel of something with a massive, massive American engine in it. And there's no apologies anywhere. And that's the best thing about it. So all that's basically to say, even if you claim outwardly to not love muscle cars or big American V8s or something like this, everyone does to a degree behind closed doors. Drop 2 gears, power down. How can you not love that? And the bonus with this Charger is you can take your kids to soccer practice in it. So here's the shocking thing, and 2 years ago, I went and test drove a Challenger SRT or 392 or Scat Pack or whatever you want to call it, and it's basically just a Challenger version of this car, and it tried to kill me. But then I drove it 2 months later at Road America. The tires were inflated to the correct PSI, and it was shockingly composed. I was legitimately scared because that day it had rained, it was cold, not good track conditions to drive something like that. However, when I got there, the car behaved.
Oh, but it sounds so good! God damn!
I mean, for something that big to compose itself that well was a shock. And here's the biggest shock here. I think this Charger might be even better. The steering is precise, the body is, the suspension is supple, the chassis is composed and balanced, and it's so shocking for something in this size. And even still, it firms up just enough when you need to send it through a corner, and it's just good. You can take a corner at a much higher speed than you think you'll be able to because the car will just behave. The suspension is stiff enough to throw it into a corner with confidence. The brakes are nice Brembos on all 4 corners. And then you have so much power to just send it. But now we have to kind of ease back and talk about the daily livability of this thing, because it is a family sedan at the end of the day. And with that, we have to talk about interiors. Now, yes, we talked about the ride being sporty, and it can be stiff when you want it to be, and it can be composed, but it also is so comfortable. I mean, these seats, I'm pretty sure, are designed by Lazy Boy. They're so comfortable and so plush and pushy. And that's kind of something that you don't necessarily want in a sports car, but when you have a family sedan like this, it makes total sense. But then yes, we have to talk about the interior and the build materials, and from a visual perspective, it's more offensive than anything else, because you start to see some of these handprints on things like the dash, and not just on the screen where you have your touchscreen Uconnect system, which is great by the way, but you see it over the passenger side, and you have these little finger marks, and I don't really know, it's like a rubberized soft touch material on the dash, but it captures every little imperfection. And it's something like that where you don't want to harp on it, because this is so much cheaper than the Lexus, but we have to acknowledge the fact that it did just get out of a Lexus, and it is $90,000, and this is less than half that price. But yeah, the interior is what you would probably expect from this price point, and that's fine. Honestly, the most important thing, and the thing that someone buying this is going to care about, is the infotainment system, and Dodge's Uconnect system is fantastic. Especially when you compare it to Lexus's Inform, or whatever they call it, their system, their joystick. It's terrible. The touchscreen is great, the resolution is crisp, the screens are bright, and things are where you would expect them to be. So yeah, at the end of the day, this is built to a price, but if you're buying a Charger for the interior, you're missing out on the point here. There's so much performance to be had. There's so much emotion and character to be drawn out of this car. The engine just dominates your experience. It's so loud, it's so visceral and emotional, and that's something that you just don't get from something like a family sedan that you can drive every single day. But with that, let's jump into the Lexus and see how it compares. And now for something completely different. Alright, not really. We talked about formula here, and yeah, it's basically the same. Big, naturally aspirated V8, rear-wheel drive, big sedan. The biggest thing that you can tell in terms of the differences in power here is, well, you can really tell that this thing is down about 100 pound-feet of torque. So here's the thing. Yeah, horsepower gets all the glory, and that's pretty typical. You come to expect that, but torque is really the thing that you drive day to day. It's the thing that you drive and commute with from a stop to a start. It's the acceleration that you feel, that twist, that jumping off the line that makes it feel peppy and nimble. And you can really kind of tell that this is lacking here. And this is my second Lexus F product that I've had in about, I don't know, 2-3 weeks. And it's the same characteristic here. It's the same powertrain. It just doesn't wake up until you get over 4,000 RPM. It's something like this that really it just resonates with me, and there's so much character in a V8, and you miss that. It's so clinical in something like a BMW, and yes, it is faster. The M5 is faster, it's quicker, it's a more adept sports car, but it just lacks that soul, that character that you get with something like this. And then throwing into a corner is just as good. The chassis is balanced, the car is planted, it's well damped, the tires are sticky, they're Michelin Pilot Super Sports, and the brakes, well, they're excellent. And then power out. Sport Plus, come to a corner. Downshifting, pitch in, power ease out. Okay, so yeah, this GSF feels a little bit more buttoned down than you get in the Charger, but I do think the Charger is kind of right on the heels here. And yeah, to be honest, it's really the sound that sells this car for you. And man, I absolutely love it. There's so much character to these Lexus V8s, but is it worth 90 grand? 85 to start? I don't personally need a lot more convincing, but in case you do, let's talk interior. All right, and for that, let's turn it down into eco mode and just ease back a little bit. Now, that's one thing that this Lexus GSF does do really, really well. it's still a Lexus at the end of the day. And when you talk about interior, I haven't gotten into a Lexus in the last 2-3 years, ever since I've started my channel, and not been blown away. I mean, even lower down in their entry UX, you have fantastic materials, and the design here, yes, it's aging, and this will be replaced. Well, it's not going to be replaced. Actually, they're killing this thing off very soon, if not this year. So what you see is what you get. And it's kind of a shame because, I mean, the interior and the cabin space is fantastic. The seats are incredibly comfortable. I literally feel like Lexus took my back and just molded a seat around it. It's fantastic. You get carbon fiber, Alcantara, brushed aluminum. Even, I mean, the leather is fantastic. It's so perforated and it just breathes. It's just good. And that's obviously where the night and day difference is with the Charger. You know, this being a $90,000 car, you would expect to have more interior, and you do by miles. But, you know, that's kind of what you expect. But that leads me to, well, the Achilles heel of every Lexus, and I hate talking about it, but we have to, because the Uconnect system on the Charger is actually pretty good. And it's the infotainment. You guys all know this is coming. Lexus's N-Form system has never been leading in terms of technology or interaction or navigability. It's just bad. And they've kind of addressed some of that with the newer kind of touchpad, trackpad laptop type control, but here this is an aged model. I mean, this is the end of the previous generation, and it still has the joystick mouse style. It has like the selecting button. You can push it down to select, or you can hit enter on either side. It doesn't work, Lexus, and you get like feedback and, you know, restraint, and it doesn't work. It's very, honestly, more than anything, it's a danger to yourself and other people on the road, because you're going to be constantly wrestling with this thing, trying to get it to do what you want to do. So I'm going to put it back into sport mode because I want to talk about this. Yes, the interior is great, the technology is terrible, and at 90 grand you have to really love this car to have to want to put up with that sort of infotainment system. But the problem is, I do love this car. And with that, let's jump outside for final thoughts. And before we get into final thoughts, I want to thank my friends at Amato, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram for letting me borrow this Charger Scat Pack. They're fantastic to work with, so thank you to them. Right, now back to these two. So before I start getting comments saying that, oh, well, these cars don't compete, this is not an E63S, this isn't an M5, well, the GSF doesn't really compete with those either. So I kind of thought that this was an interesting premise. A couple weeks ago, I put up an RCF versus Mustang GT video, and I liked the premise of that. We're focusing on performance per dollar. And to be honest, there's a huge delta here in price, but not so much in terms of performance. And with that, let's talk about the specifics of price, starting with the Lexus. This GSF starts at $85,000, which means by the time it rolls off the assembly line, it's going to be closer to $90,000, $95,000, maybe pushing $100,000 depending on how you spec it. And it's kind of an aged model. We talked about this before. This is the last year, or one of the last years that we're going to get this car. It hasn't been updated in a while, and that really shows in the technology. And we won't beat a dead horse there. But what we do want to focus on here is the fact that, yes, after options, let's say the mean buying price of a GSF is about 90 grand. This Scat Pack starts at $40,000, making it less than half the cost of this GSF. So basically it comes down to this. If you can get past the badge, and you can get past the prestige, and, you know, a little bit of a nicer interior, you can save yourself half the money by going here. And you don't sacrifice really anything in terms of performance. The infotainment is actually navigable, it's very comfortable, and this thing is an absolute riot. This Charger Scat Pack is definitely a bargain. But with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up, subscribe. We're pushing to 10,000 by the end of the year, so if you can be a part of that, thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time.